So, all right. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. Can everyone hear me? Get it closer. Okay. Thank you. Oh, that is better, isn't it? Thank you. All right. So, I really appreciate this turnout. This is terrific. My name is Linda Long-Belil. I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen for Holden, and I'm the chair of the MBTA Communities Act Working Group. And we are going to talk tonight about our plan. Some of you may have come to our meeting on the 27th. We're going to give you a little update, address some new issues, give you a little bit of new information, and take some questions. So I'm going to have the other members of the group introduce themselves.
James Scorfus, Holden Town resident.
Ken Strom, Holden Conservation Commission.
Alberg, Finance Committee.
So we had a great team, very experienced and thoughtful people, which was wonderful for this project. So the MBTA Communities Act was signed into law by Charlie Baker, Governor Charlie Baker, in 2021. And he said that he signed it because for Massachusetts to succeed, we've got to build more housing. If you look at all the demographic trends, the crowd we're losing is the 25 to 35-year-olds. I didn't mind having musical accompaniment, but so what happens if Holden does not comply? Well, the Attorney General has already filed a complaint against our town, and a judge can appoint a special master to decide on the zoning forest. So we could lose local control. And currently, Holden is also ineligible for at least 16 state grant programs. And we've already been rejected for some state grant funding due to noncompliance. Some towns, like Winthrop, have been denied over $1 million in funding. So it's no joke. The town of Milton paid $275,000 in legal fees fighting the MBTA Communities Act, and they lost. They lost. And so that's an important fact to keep in mind. Nobody has won a lawsuit. Well, there was one lawsuit that was dismissed for lack of standing, but no one's won on the merits against the state. So Holden is required to comply with the law. The law requires only to zone, not to build. Nobody has to build anything. And Holden is required to do this because we're adjacent to Worcester, which has public transportation. Holden is one of only 9 towns left that are still out of compliance. 168 towns have already complied. So, as you may recall, there was another plan presented at town meeting last year, and it was voted down. So I thought about that and thought, how can we maybe do this better? How can we involve members of the community in making this decision? Because I got a lot of complaints about how nobody knew what was going on, nobody understood the plan, nobody knew where the plan came from, et cetera. So I thought, well, let's put one together with citizens, with town residents, and other people with expertise in the town. So this working group was established by the Board of Selectmen on September 22nd, 1925, listen to me, I'm old, 2025, to develop a plan for compliance with zoning requirements of the MBTA Communities Act, get input from relevant boards and committees, and solicit feedback from and educate the public about the act and what it means for Holden. So we had 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, myself and another gentleman, Will Holmes, who's not here tonight, 1 representative each from the Conservation Commission, Mr. Ken Holmes, the Planning Board, which was Scott Carlson, the chair, and Alberg from the Finance Committee. 4 town residents, Mr. Scorfus being one of them, and 3 others. And we had the town manager, the town planner, and a consultant from the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, who were our ex officio non-voting members. They were there to help the committee, support the committee. So we thought about a lot of different considerations that we needed to keep in mind when we were looking at various parcels. We wanted to minimize the overall impact on town and residents, preserve the look and feel of neighborhoods, minimize traffic impact. I want to note that I'm saying minimize. We can't eliminate all potential impacts altogether, but we can certainly minimize them, and we tried to do that. So we wanted to avoid zoning over existing single-family home neighborhoods. We wanted also to avoid restricted and environmentally sensitive lands. And of course, to minimize impact on the infrastructure in schools. And lastly, we wanted to avoid burdening a single neighborhood. We didn't want to put everything in one place. That was important. We identified and considered at least 20 locations, looked at the current uses of the land and restrictions using the Holden GIS and the state interactive map, which you'll see in a minute. We held public meetings and consulted with required town committees and organizations. So we talked to the Holden Housing Authority, we talked to the school district, and a couple of other town organizations. The district isn't really a town organization, but of course the Holden schools are part of it. We talked a lot about the impact on existing neighborhoods and traffic and schools. I'm now going to turn this over to Mr. Sikorfis.
Oh, you can just leave it there.
Oh, okay, there we go.
So what is an overlay district? So to comply, we need to overlay an existing district with a new zone for multifamily housing. So there were certain requirements mandated by the state. I believe those are covered in another slide, but at least 15 units per acre. One had to be at least 25 acres, and we had to zone for 50 acres total. The existing zoning rules still apply. The existing zoning does not change, and the planning board can still enforce them, of course. The existing use of the land does not change. As well as this, in the bylaw adopted, there are setback requirements as well as height restrictions. That height restriction is 35 foot, 2.5 stories. Some people might ask, what is 2.5 story? That constitutes like a dormer or something like that. And at the bottom, there are two examples of existing properties in Holden with their densities listed above them. So 12.6, 18.2, figures split the difference, and you're at 15, almost exactly. This is a map of the excluded areas listed by the state, so it is, in some cases, in contrast to the first map that was displayed on the title slide. This one, gray, is no-go, white is allowed, so you can see how much area was omitted from our consideration right off the get-go. You can see the roads represented as red lines, and the more dense the roads, the more houses there are on those properties. So immediately, just eyeballing this, at least 50% is already out of consideration, mandated by the state, would not have been approved. So to go over the parcels.
So this is what's known as the Halstead parcel. During permitting, it was known as Winterberry Hollow. And subsequently, it was the Reserve at Salisbury, I believe. Sundine Development, circa 2008-ish. This is Salisbury Street on the westerly side, pretty much across from Fisher Road. Cranbrook Drive goes from Salisbury over to Newell. The site itself has 3 buildings on the north part, 3 buildings on the south part with a garage and pool, and garages, pool, and a common facility in the middle there. There is that driveway that goes over to Newell. So we are proposing this magenta hatched area that totals about 11 acres in area. That's the zoning overlay on this particular slide. And here we have the Holden Trap Rock site. So this is on Main Street, North Main Street, if you will, roughly across from Millbrook Street. Active quarry to the east of the chosen site. This is 39 acres in the area. It does abut the former Sandstrom APR, now run by the Lilac Hedge Farm folks, owned by them. This one has a number of environmental concerns besides site concerns. So there is a wetlands and streams connected. This is actually less restrictive than shown on the previous slide that James explained. This is a 100-foot buffer under the Wetlands Protection Act. So it's a pond, and that is indeed a hydraulic connection, a stream that connects with this stream, which is mapped as perennial. So that one has 100, plus it's got Rivers Act implications here. So it's a 200-foot buffer from the stream bank for the river. So that's that line. Besides that, this is a hillside and partially carved out quarry area. Very steep. It rises to, well, there's 980-foot elevation in the back. 1,080 in the back, basically southwesterly corner, and I think it's 900 feet at the stream and about 930 average at the road. Those are two 60-foot wide access points, about 200 foot there, from there to there. And we sit about 500 something feet from the field, and about, at this point here, about 210 feet plus or minus from the property line of the Sandstorm APR or lilac hedge.
Can we just hold questions to the end? We'll be done soon. Yes. Take it away, Al.
I'd like to continue, if I may. Can we go back to that previous slide, Linda?
Sure.
Just clear up some perhaps latest information regarding the Trap Rock site. I heard in coming in here tonight that sewer was available for this site due to a Worcester sewer running through the property. What runs through the property, approximately somewhere way back here, is the Rutland Holden trunk sewer, which is owned and operated by DCR, Division of Water Supply Protection. It's the main sewer out of Rutland. It's the sewer that Holden uses to discharge into Worcester. It is not available for connection. The last connection that was allowed to it, as far as I know, was in 2004, when Anna Maria College was allowed to connect into it. Additionally, as far as sewer capacity goes, our own current Public Works Director has given the opinion that sewer capacity in Holden is extremely limited for any future development. And I can confirm that as a professional engineer, knowing that we're almost at the limit of what we can discharge to the city of Worcester. So to say that sewer is available here or pretty much anywhere is incorrect. The other thing that was brought up tonight relatively recently was the issue of liability for Lilac Hedge Farm. Apparently, the concern is that if high-density development were constructed, allergies, adjacent to this property, that the liability insurance would be withdrawn. I have some potentially bad news for the owners in this regard, because if we do absolutely nothing, if this zoning fails, and the zoning sits as it exists tonight, affordable housing can be built on the Trap Rock site. And for those of you who want to watch this on replay or take notes, you can look at the existing Holden zoning bylaw, Table 1A9, allowing affordable housing. Retirement communities can be built as zoning exists right now, Table 1A10. Child care centers can be built without any approval even by the planning board under Table 1B3. Religious purposes, of course, are totally exempt under Table 1B1. So we could build churches, we could build summer religious camps and so forth. All of these right now are allowable, so I hope that the owners of the Lilac Hedge Farm have informed their insurance people that these can be built as the situation exists right now. Next slide, Linda.
Mm-hmm. Just hang on.
The first two I mentioned, the affordable housing and the retirement communities, are by approval by the planning board. The rest of them are absolutely by right. And I should point out that if the overlay zoning goes through, that will be with approval by the planning board too. The right to construct still requires site plan approval. And I hope all of you understand the fact that if this MBTA zoning were to go through, the fact that it's technically, quote, by right, doesn't mean that a person goes out there and starts construction at will. The entire project goes before the planning board for all sorts of reviews, environmental reviews, and so forth. So basically the same situation, MBTA zoning versus the uses that I mentioned, with the exception of religious uses and childcare, which are totally by right. And the other reason, one of the other reasons that we picked this site is because Mass Broken Stone is a very reputable, continuing concern, extractive industries. They sell earth materials, gravel, stone, bituminous concrete. Been in business for many, many years, and we expect them to be in business for many, many years going forward, which is yet another reason why development of this site becomes less and less likely, certainly over the short term.
Yes, we tried to find sites that frankly were likely to have little or no building. This one is likely to have no building, and Halsted probably has room for very little. You can see here, if you look back at this slide, it might be hard to see where you are, but there are 3 buildings here. Those buildings equal 108 buildings, 108 units there already built. And the likelihood that Halsted, if they chose to build, and it's hard to know if they would, the likelihood that they would knock down those buildings and evict all those renters and deal with all the legal issues that would arise seems very, very slim. And they have maybe a little room here in the northwest corner. The most they could build under our bylaw, which limits them, is that they could only build 64 new units, 64 new units. So they really, if they even wanted to build here, they would have very limited capacity for building. So, and as Mr. Berg said, Trap Rock, here you can see in the bottom of the slide, it says that their facilities have significant reserves, giving them the capacity to supply crushed stone products to their valued customers for decades to come. So they're planning to be there a long time. So we decided not to put affordable housing into this plan. It does not require affordable housing, and the proposed plan includes market rate housing only. Market rate housing only. It does not require the town to invest in infrastructure. So if a company did want to come and build on Trap Rock for some reason, they would have to deal with their own sewer there, and I believe their own water too, if I've got that right. Have I got that right, Al? Yes. So that's another factor that would make it highly unlikely to be developed. Both sides have alternative routes to town and the highway. We're not going to say that nobody can go down Main Street, but we looked for sites that had alternative routes. So, for example, the Trap Rock site in Jefferson, a lot of people in Jefferson cut over to Mount Pleasant and then over to Quinnipoxet to get to the highway. And, of course, Halsted, a lot of folks go down Salisbury Street to get to Worcester and to other locations. So we can't eliminate all traffic, but we can minimize it. And also, much too many people's surprise, multifamily housing typically generates less than 1 student per unit and less than single-family homes. The Halsted development has generated very few children in the Wachusett schools. So, for example, and I got the number of students from the school district, I got de-identified data, I just wanted the raw number. There are only 16 kids at Dawson who reside in the 192 units at Halsted. There are only 5 out of the 192 units who reside at at Halsted who go to Mount View, and there are only 9 kids from Halsted who go to the high school. So very, very few kids come out of these units. And these units, just so you know, these are 1 to 3 bedroom units, mostly 1s and 2s. And the law, the MBTA Communities Act, even though it says that the homes have to be quote unquote suitable for families, it does allow 1 bedrooms. There's no minimum bedroom requirement. So there can be 1, 2, 1 and 2 units, 2 bedroom units there. So if you do the math, and we could do the math together if you like, if you want to take out your smartphone. You want to take out your smartphone and do some math? We're talking about schools. Ah. You don't even need algebra for this. So as I said, Dawson sends 16 units to the elementary schools. And if you take, you divide 16 by 192, you get 0.08333 kids per unit, okay? And then if you take that times the 64 units that they can still build there, you get 5.333333 kids, okay? So 5 1/3 kids would go from Halsted, additional kids would go from Halsted to Dawson. So I know people have been very, very concerned about this, especially parents. I know our schools are all pretty full, but this particular project is not going to flood our schools with kids. And I would note also that the trend is that the number of kids is going to go down over time. This is data from NESDEC, New England, a New England organization that calculates population estimates for schools. You can see here, starting in, I think, 2024 to 25, it climbed a bit, and then, as I think many of us know, it's been declining ever since. It's going to go up and down a little bit, but the number of kids in the schools has been declining. So this really will not fill our schools beyond capacity. The potential impact. These buildings are very, very valuable, very valuable. And several studies have concluded that additional property tax and other revenues from the new multifamily developments usually fully compensate for the additional costs truly borne at the local level. And a good example of just how valuable these are is that in 2026, Halsted Holden paid $567,189 in property taxes. That's quite a nice contribution to our local tax base. So we had an opportunity, we took this plan and we had an opportunity to submit it to the state for pre-review, and they came back with very positive results. They said the proposed plan would put the town in a good position if adopted. So vote yes when you get to town meeting. Town meeting is next week on the 23rd, Monday the 23rd at 7 o'clock at the high school. Get there early, there's going to be a crowd. And vote yes because we want to stop paying legal fees. We don't want to be in the same position as Milton paying $275,000 for legal fees. And that doesn't even include what they paid their town council. That was just a law firm. Vote yes so that we can keep local control. Our planning board can modify, can put restrictions on the size and the shape and all kinds of things on this housing, and they can keep it under 2.5 stories. So let's keep local control, because otherwise the Attorney General can appoint, the Attorney General's lawsuit, if successful, and is very likely to be, can result in a judge appointing a special master to come in and zone for us. And let's keep it local. So we have a survey here. You can use the QR code, or you can copy this link and into your smartphone or your computer, and it will take you to a little survey that we have about housing in Holden. So here are references. And so thank you very much for your attention. We really appreciate this great crowd being here tonight. This is wonderful. So we're so glad people are interested and engaged. So now if people want to ask questions, I put a microphone up here on the seat. I'm sorry we don't have a podium. Apologize.
been on different sides of issues before, but before I get to my question to you, I have to thank you for all your work on the sewer fiasco with Worcester. Congratulations. I've heard that you're responsible. My question, if you can't tie into the sewer and they're left, what does that do to a project cost for them? Because I guess there are two groups of people, two of the three groups of people could vote for this. The ones who want more multifamily housing, the ones who don't want it but want us to be in compliance, and then the third group, which is, I'm just against anything. So what is, for the second group, what does adding the sewer cost into having them deal with that, what does that do to a project cost if somebody wanted to come in and do it?
I'm not sure I completely understand. You mean if sewer is not available?
Correct.
Then of course, the developer could opt for a so-called on-site solution, which would be a Title V or a sanitary code system built on the site. That I couldn't possibly give you a quote on a price, but I can tell you that it then depends on having adequate soils, having adequate distances between that facility and water supply, having adequate distance between that facility and the housing itself. Long story short, it's going to be extremely difficult and costly to build on-site sewage disposal systems on a high-density site.
That's my point. We're driving up, effectively, not being able to tie in the sewer drives up the cost of that.
Absolutely.
Right, to the point where it might not even be economically viable.
That's quite possible. Sewers aren't cheap either, but having to forego them for a high-density development can make life very difficult for a developer.
Any other questions?
I don't need the mic. Am I loud enough?
Okay, all right. Yeah, you be on the microphone. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ryan McKay, 106 Bond Road, 2401 Main Street in Holden. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I have 3 specific questions for the working group today. To ensure the context is clear for the record, I will be starting each question with direct references and quotes from our past meetings. I ask that you please wait until I have finished presenting the full scope of each of these discussion points that I will indicate as my question before you respond. Question 1. Linda, at the October 30th working group meeting, you made 2 very specific statements that I've been trying to reconcile. First, you stated, I do think we should include parcels that can be developed as intended by the law. Mm-hmm. Second, when referencing the Trap Rock overlay, you noted, it seems to me a meaningful portion of it could be buildable. My question, based on these 2 statements, specifically your focus on buildability and the intent of the law, how can you argue that the eventual goal is anything other than seeing the Trap Rock parcel developed?
Let me just say that I've learned a lot working on this project, and I've learned from these gentlemen here just how difficult it is to pull some of this off. And so, frankly, over time, my view has changed. There could be some building on the Halsted site, but I really do think that the Trap Rock site is not going to be built in anything like the foreseeable future, and my views have changed since that time.
Can you show this? We'll bring up the slide so we can kind of explain it again.
Let's see, okay.
As I mentioned, it's quite a hillside.
It is, yes. Hang on one second.
I'm aware I'm
It's
on the
180
other side.
feet. I know, you're in a butter, so you know.
I'm sorry, I got to get there.
Fortunately, I had one with contour lines and they didn't come through on this one very well, but this is a pond that sits high up. These areas have been carved out over the decades. This site's been worked fairly heavily. I mean, that's a 160-foot deep quarry right there with a roadway that spirals down into it.
But that's outside of the parcel.
Oh, no, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Sorry. So as I said, this is a very hilly site. 900 feet, 1,080 feet, about 930 in the middle of the frontage. There's a perennial stream running through it. There's a wetland. There's wetlands associated with the stream. There's an intermittent stream. This is all per Mass GIS, not field verified or surveyed. The site itself, these, hard to see these magenta colored lines. Those are the boundary lines per the GIS. The setbacks, I basically measured from, this is 2023 aerial imagery from SGIS. I don't know if you've expanded your fields. Looking at Google, it looked like there had been some.
Yeah, that's not an updated.
Okay. This area, I think, has been worked. Maybe you've done some forestry there?
That's a 50-acre field right there.
Down here?
Yep.
So there were some roadways, maybe logging roads or something. So we are about 210 feet from the property corner there. But from that field that was shown in 2023, 5.5 and 570 feet. But yeah, it's a huge hill here in the corner, but it has been carved out over the decades. I mean, if Linda spoke at October 30th, it must have been a Halloween slippage, because this, I mean, I'm a land surveyor for 42 years and a civil engineer. I've done site designs, residential designs. I would tell any developer to walk away from this one. This is a horrific site. I mean, that's just what it is.
Right. And as I said, I've learned a lot from these gentlemen here about these sites and about the buildability of them and any number of things. And October 30th feels like a lifetime ago in terms of this particular project.
I would also note that at the top of that, what would be looking down at the bottom is completely flat at the top of the hill. Moving on to question number 2. In the same meeting, you also said, I would prefer to avoid any parcels that have people or businesses on them. Yet, when looking at the Paquette gravel pit property, you laughed and suggested maybe he's looking to retire. For the record, if this overlay moves forward as proposed, you aren't just suggesting a retirement. You are effectively forcing the end of a nearly 90-year-old family business in town. When that business is forced out, the remaining 291 acres of Trap Rock that Trap Rock owns will inevitably become standard residential development. Furthermore, I have to ask, what happens to my farm? My business, Lilac Hedge Farm, is a complex operation with a significant debt load that I am not able to manage because of the specific scale in which we currently operate. By destabilizing the land use around us, you are destabilizing my ability to remain a viable business. My question, knowing the risk to the 2 local major businesses and employers and the importance of the agricultural charter of this town, do you still feel today that this location is the best location?
So let me just state one thing to remind everyone. It's very important to keep in mind that the people who are operating in these locations can continue to operate in these locations. The current zoning stays. It's optional for them to sell to a builder. They don't have to sell to a builder. They don't have to end their businesses. They don't have to end their operations.
But there's no guarantee that 5 and 10 years down the road that they can't come in and force the sale.
Who would force the sale? There's no way to, I don't know of a realistic way that.
Prerequisite is there for forcing a sale.
The same reason we're dealing with this right now, the reason they're putting this law forward.
That would fit under eminent domain, which is traditionally used for public uses. Mm-hmm. There have been some instances where some private land has been claimed, but through abandonment, and your land isn't abandoned.
So back to my question, do you still feel today this is the best location?
I think it's the best that we could find in our deliberations. So I don't think that I don't think that the Massachusetts Broken Stone Company is going to stop operating anytime in the near future or even the distant future. They say themselves they intend to continue operating for decades to come.
Did they say that to you? Because I know they weren't given the opportunity.
Well, they talked with the town manager. He's back there.
Do you know when they talked to him?
Last Friday,
Yep,
yes.
after they got a call from the Telegram and Gazette asking for comment on this. My last and final question on feasibility and strategic zoning. I want to address a point made by Town Manager Peter Lukes at the same October 30th meeting. He quite clearly identified that zoning over existing residential neighborhoods is far less feasible for developers because it jacks up the cost and makes it nearly impossible to consolidate enough small parcels to build. Specifically, he said, If you're looking on the east side of town, you're talking about generally putting on top of something that already exists. So if you're rezoning a neighborhood with even 20 parcels that are already owned by someone, you have to get all 20 separate owners to somehow collaborate. The likelihood of that happening is like zero. Plus, it also jacks up the cost of every parcel individually if you're going to put it over what's already a single-family home and a developer's going to pay $500,000 an acre, that they then have to demolish everything and then to somehow collect all 20 acres is pretty unlikely. My question, if the goal of the town is to comply with state mandates while protecting our remaining open space and active businesses, why was the difficult path of zoning over existing neighborhoods, which would satisfy the law while making actual development unlikely, not explored more thoroughly? Why instead did this group choose to target a raw parcel of land like Trap Rock, which you yourselves have identified previously as buildable, therefore making the destruction of these businesses a foregone conclusion?
Because prior to October 30th? I don't remember the exact date, but there was a Republican Town Committee meeting where the speaker talked about concerns about zoning over existing housing, single-family homes. So we thought that, specifically he mentioned the maze as a place that might get zoned over. And, he started talking about they're going to raise the maze. And so that seemed to create a lot of anxiety in the crowd. So it seemed unwise to create that kind of anxiety. I think you would be asking the same question about zoning over single-family housing as you are now about Trap Rock. I think that.
So instead, take away our livelihood.
No one's going to take away. Can I just ask you? Let me ask him, Mr. McKay. Why do you think someone's going to take away your livelihood?
Have you read what I put out? Have you listened to what I've said?
I've read what you've had to say about your insurance.
And then you told me that you could refer your insurance agent as if they write a farm policy. Every year, our business sits down and reviews our insurance. A responsible business does that. You go through and evaluate what other options. I can tell you I've done that, not just this year in response. Every year. I don't have the options out there. I don't have the same thing. It's not an auto or a homeowner's policy like you may have. Does your insurance agent write farm packages?
I do not know, but I'd be happy to find out.
Linda?
Yes, please.
If I might, with your permission, Mr. McKay, ask you a question. Have you informed your insurance company of the uses which can now be permitted on that site, which are extremely similar to the use that would be proposed by the overlay zoning? I think this is a key question. I mean, you've stated a moment ago that the purpose of the result of our rezoning would be to, quote, destabilize two businesses. I suggest that's a highly speculative statement, for which there's no backup at the moment. So if you're that concerned about liability insurance because of proximate uses, then how do you deal with the possible affordable housing? How do you deal with a possible retirement community? How do you deal with child care centers and religious uses? How does that happen?
I don't even understand the
Well,
The question is not to you, Mr. Cooley, it's to Mr. McKay.
I understand that, but I do know a little something about the religious exemptions, having used them a few times. So let me just say this. The reason he's concerned is because what we're talking about is a profit-making venture. What you're talking about are nonprofits, right? I mean, a church is not going to go in there because the church is not going to have the money not only to develop it, but then to get the money out of it. Why would they do that? It would cost millions of dollars to even start. And the same with child care. I mean,
That's what?
well, I mean,
There's
it's
the
just kind of
statement, if you would.
comparing the two, market rate housing, 600 and some odd units versus a daycare center or a church. I think that's like, it's not apples and oranges, it's apples and Fords. I mean, you're just making stuff up.
The question is, at the 11th hour, this committee and this town has heard an issue come up about, essentially boils down to the insurability of the McKay property. Something we hadn't heard until, at least I hadn't heard until 2 days ago. So as long as we're on that, Mr. Cooley, then let's talk about the insurability. The implication, sir, is that if people wander from some development on Holden Trap Rock onto the McKay property, there's a liability issue. Now, there are uses that can be put on the Holden Trap Rock property as it exists right now where people can wander onto the McKay property. So is their insurer aware of that? And explain to the folks here and to me, if you would be so kind, as to what the difference is between then and now.
I'm sure if we could bring the insurer in here, that would be lovely. But let me just put it this way. If the Trap Rock is sold and a church starts building there, he'll have exactly the same problem. You're right. The question is, how's a church going to make the same kind of money that a 625-unit housing project is going to make? And the answer is, they're not. I mean, you would need to have a Crystal Cathedral on steroids in order to get that kind of money. So, I mean, and that's what I mean. It's just not an apt comparison, and I'm sorry, but it's not apt at all.
I appreciate your intent to focus this completely on the religious issue, but that's completely bypassing the affordable
let's talk
housing or the
childcare.
retirement community issue.
How many children would have to be taken care of on Trap Rock in order to make it commercially viable? I'll ask you.
How many
You're the
people
engineer,
would
you
need
tell
to
me.
wander onto the site to create a liability issue?
Well, here's
One.
and that's fine. And so what we're saying is we have an ideal situation right now, right? With the Trap Rock thing and limited possibility of somebody just wandering onto the farm. But I had my own questions here I wanted to ask. Again, we started with Charlie Baker, and he said that this law came about because of the need to build housing, which I find instructive, right? Because we hear zoning only. All we have to do is zone, and the problem goes away. I'm sure you guys know that Burlington zoned part of their mall as part of their overlay. A number of towns have done similar things to get out of this. And I just wonder, you know, at the end, I guess my first question would be, if everybody just makes a total joke of the overlay, in other words, they designate areas where no property can ever be reasonably built, like you claim Trap Rock cannot be built, then the state's just going to shrug. I wonder if that's their attitude, why are they suing us? And I can answer that question by reading the words of Andrea Campbell myself. She says, Massachusetts has a housing crisis. This is the woman who's suing us. And our Commonwealth is unaffordable. The vast majority of MBTA communities deeply understand that developing more multi-family housing will improve our ability to attract business. She wants units built. So what do you suppose the state is going to do when we just go, well, we zoned, we're not going to build, but we zoned?
Well, I would say they want units to be built. Their goal is to have 220,000 units built over, I forget how many years. Frankly, I don't think they're going to meet their target. I don't think they're going to meet their target, but they'll have more housing than they would have had probably without the law. Because there are suburbs, I would say different from ours, that have even more restrictive zoning laws than we do, where they zone only for really large lots and only for single-family homes. And so they'll get some housing out of those suburbs, and they'll get maybe a little bit from suburbs like ours. I think that they feel that they have to try something. I certainly don't think this is a perfect law, I'll tell you that. But this was the sort of least impactful way to try to implement it. It was a plan that was built with citizen input. We had people from all over Holden, from each region in Holden, who had contributions, who contributed to this plan. We discussed it very thoroughly. We met weekly for months to try to come up with this plan, and I think it's the best we can do at this point in time.
Okay, but nobody could spend 15 minutes to contact the people that were actually going to be zoned and their abutters.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. Again, as I said, I've learned a lot throughout this process. And something I had assumed was that, of course, we had to notify people. I thought the planning board notified people before its hearings. And in fact, I turned out to be mistaken in that assumption. And believe me, it would have been much better for us on the MBTA working group to have known about more of the concerns. We heard some of the concerns because we were listening to people. People notified us, contacted us about various concerns, but it would have been much better if we had known earlier in the process that some of the concerns voiced tonight had come up. It would have been much better. We could have taken that into account, or at least addressed it maybe better than we can do it tonight. And before I forget, we're going to also be taking questions on Thursday night. We'll be meeting on Thursday night at 5 o'clock here again in the Senior Center from 5 to 6:30, just to give people to get another opportunity. At the very least, I think we're doing a better job than was done last year in terms of educating the public and hearing what people's concerns are.
Two quick questions, and these are quick. Number one, you said, what your sign there said, stop paying legal fees. How much are we paying right now in legal fees concerning the MBTA ACA?
We've paid up about $35,000.
No, right now. What are we paying right now? You said stop paying legal fees.
Well, we haven't really paid anything more than that, I don't believe.
Thank you.
Yet.
And then
But she hasn't. But let me just say, she has filed a complaint. If we don't pass this step plan on the 23rd, then she will proceed with her complaint. We'll have to answer, and the lawsuit will be underway, and we'll spend months and months and maybe even years fighting with the Attorney General about this.
Okay, my last question. Oh, sorry. My last question, maybe you can tell me who said this. Between Worcester-owned watershed, conservation land, residential neighborhoods, and wetlands, Holden has very little land that can be zoned to meet this law.
Right.
Do you know who said that?
I'll go over which ones are restricted. Okay, I don't remember who exactly said
Well,
what.
it was my good friend Robin Van Loo who said that.
Okay, fine. So let me just review it again. The town, these green parcels are restricted either by ownership or by agricultural preservation restriction, Sandstrom Farm, watershed protection restriction, that was the one on Bailey. What was her name? Anyhow. There's White Oak Land Conservation Trust, of which I'm a board member. We have CRs on a number of properties, and we own some outright. City of Worcester, all this green area here, related to the Pine Hill Reservoir, the Kendall Reservoir, and the Holden Reservoirs. Up there, you got the Quinnapoxet Reservoir, green. Yellow is Commonwealth of Massachusetts DCR, formerly MDC, City of Boston watershed, in the 22 whatever towns. Tons of land. Well, some of that yellow is actually, there's Fish and Wildlife up off of North Street. Let's see, purple is White Oak, and some of these are actually missing. This GIS hasn't been updated in a long time. They're missing 138 acres of our land off of, let's see, Salisbury Street. Yeah, so actually we have this one, Oak Hill, open space. We have the Stryer piece off of Fisher in here that doesn't show up. Puffer Heininger, 100 acres in here. So there's even more. Basically, these are all areas that you can't build on. There's Audubon, the orangey color. And that's Audubon up by Eagle Lake. I mean, there's not much left. And then all these streets. There's the Spaghetti Belt, half quarter-acre lots. What are you going to do, take 50 acres of quarter-acre lots, 200 homes? Nah, I don't think so. These are all neighborhoods that are built out. There's not much left, unfortunately. We're trying to pick something that's basically unbuildable. I mean, last year at town meeting, the quiet part wasn't said aloud. It's the town dump, the former town dump, the landfill. It's the ECC brownfield site. It was also Halsted. But, what developer is going to touch those? So, our hands are tied as to what parcels we can really pick here. Was there anything else question about the map?
My question might be part of that. Good evening. My name is Kim Belil, and I live at 160 Newell Road. We've had a significant amount of building in our area, with the Westminster properties bringing in a lot of homes there. And now on Pine Tree, we're seeing already planned development of multiple types of housing over the next different phases. What implication is there of the overlay going over something that's already built, that there is no room to build anymore?
That could be done. Go ahead. Yes.
That's exactly what we're doing at Halsted.
Yeah.
Those 3 buildings to the north, 108 units are within the district. There's maybe room to squeeze in 64, I think it's less
Maybe.
than that. There's a vernal pool in there that was certified during the project. I don't know if it still qualifies, but there's a vernal pool and an old road cut for Sandra Drive that was never constructed off of Cranbrook Drive back in the day. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, over existing housing, I understand Newell Road, the old Trilson Sand Pit, you know, what do they call that again? Westminster Place.
Yeah.
Right, and then I think it's 106 units, the Pine Tree, 106 or something.
They have a lot of units,
Condominium, yeah, single,
which seems like a
duplex and
perfect
triplex.
fit for what they're trying to achieve without actually potentially building more. So,
I guess I don't understand the question exactly. What, are we zone the Pine Tree estates, or?
yeah. It's already in the process of being developed, and that may accomplish your goal, meet the state's requirement, which I think is actually not necessarily a great law that was passed, but it's already being developed, and it seems to meet a lot of the criteria.
So it doesn't meet the 15 units per acre, however.
It's the acreage. They have a lot of stuff going on. It's up to 15 units per acre. Correct?
If we could go back in time, maybe we would do that, but we're out of time. We're past the Attorney General's deadline. She's already filed a complaint in court. We are past time, and we need to move. And this law isn't necessarily set in stone.
I think it would be good for them to consider changing the law, but secondly, it's what's best for our town. That's what matters.
Eric Latham, nice to see you guys again. I've had so many thoughts and opinions about what is being presented here, but I think I need to go back to Steve Cooley's, one of his comments, which was, stop paying legal fees. Well, we're not paying any legal fees right now, but if this goes through and we build and we lose the farm that's at Lilac Hedge, isn't there a potential lawsuit for violation on the Right to Farm Act here?
Well, let's be clear. At least I've heard, I don't know about some of the folks out there, I've heard any evidence given here tonight or any real facts given tonight that you're going to lose the farm. That's highly speculative.
If he can't be insured, he loses the farm.
Yeah, maybe. And nobody answered my question about what the difference is with MBTA zoning versus now in terms of the potential uses on the Holden Trap Rock site. That's key.
I will also say, as a member, I only heard of this a couple of days ago. Was it Wachu Chat? I mean, that whole spiel.
Okay, well, I don't expect Ryan McKay
that never
to
came
be...
forward at the other meetings we had.
I don't expect Ryan McKay, who runs a multi-million-dollar business, to be in tuned to what's happening here. He's running a business. He's thinking everything's fine, but he's potentially going to lose his farm. So you may say stop paying legal fees now.
I don't
You
understand.
may
There's a
be
long
paying
way to-
legal fees later on.
There's a long way to jump between not being able to insure a 75-acre parcel and losing your farm.
So I want to say also, if I may, James, do you want to continue about that?
No.
Hey, what's the issue with the farm? Do you need the housing to be fenced? That happens all the time. Put up a 6-foot, 8-foot fence.
Is
Vinyl
it an
flat.
adjacency, or is it a...
What are you trying to keep people
is it
out?
proximity?
Is that the deal? I don't understand. What is the insurance deal?
Listen, if he loses his insurance, then he doesn't
What
have
is
the
that?
right to
Why
farm.
would he lose his insurance?
Why would he lose his insurance? Again, people can cross over. How about this? Imagine, I grew up in a time when kids can roam around crazy. Imagine a 1,500-pound cow stomping on a kid. Would you want that to happen? No, because that would be a liability issue. That's the liability, is that someone could get hurt or killed.
I grew up on Mount View Drive next to Mount View School before it was constructed. The farmer Clarence Carlson's cows used to wander back there. There was a stone wall. They would actually get into the neighborhood quite often.
What was that, 30, 40, 50 years
Yeah, I'm
ago?
talking like 1960.
Okay. Well,
So I'm saying,
this is
you know,
2026
Okay,
now.
Gentlemen, can we
I mean,
not
I don't
shout,
think
please?
cows go trampling kids.
But, okay, but let's go off and let's just say that this isn't buildable. You're saying that this is not going to be buildable.
It's very, very, very unlikely to be buildable. It's highly speculative. I don't know that insurance companies are worried about highly speculative. I don't even know if they're allowed to take highly speculative claims into considerations into account. I think to focus on something that's so highly speculative and decide that it's absolutely going to happen just doesn't make sense. And I do think Mr. McKay has been paying a lot of attention since he's quoting back to me things I said on October 30th. So,
I would
so
say
I
because
just
he's getting caught up now. I mean, but that's besides the point. Let me ask another question. I've highly discussed the cost to the town. I did that at last town meeting. I've done it, in recent town meetings here or recent meetings that you've held. But let's look at the revenue side. Have you done the calculations on what 650 units at Trap Rock would result?
in terms of what, tax?
No, not taxes, revenue. I'm looking at this from an investment point. An investor's going to want you come in and say, maybe get paid back in 3 years, 2, 3 years, maybe 4 years if you're lucky. If you do an average of what's the average rental price? $3,000, $3,500?
You'd probably spend multi-millions trying to develop that site. I don't think you could do a septic system. It's all rock. What are you going to purchase?
Okay, in 3 years' time.
Even if you tie into the sewer.
Well, hold on. Let me get my question out.
You're asking a question.
In 3 years' time, at like $3,500, maybe $4,000 given inflation on 650 units, you are talking close to $100 million in revenue. You mean to tell me that an investor's not going to look at that and say, maybe we can get this. Maybe we can get this property. Maybe we can build on this. We're talking 9 figures in 3 years' time. Think about that. Think about that.
You're not talking anywhere near that, sir. Throwing numbers out with a timeout. We document what we put before you. Anything. If you want to know how many kids per unit, we've got the documentation. If you want to know whether the sewer is available, we've got the documentation. Zoning, we've got the documentation. Some folks out there just throw out numbers to see if they'll stick on the wall. We've heard. 2 weeks ago, I came to the senior center and I saw a little brown paper that was apparently left over from a meeting. $250 million for a new school. I sure do understand numbers, and I don't understand yours. Excuse me? The average rental price? I have no idea, but I guess we're probably talking thousands of dollars a month.
So we're between $3,000 and $3,500. $3,000 and $3,500.
Yep.
Okay, times that by 650, then times that by 36.
We're not doing 650, and we're not doing it anytime soon, because one of the things that we were very careful to try and do, as has been pointed out here, I think about 3 different ways, is to pick sites that are very unlikely to be developed ever, and certainly not developed anytime in the immediate future. Now, if anybody's got any evidence that that's not the case, I think we'd love to hear it. But we've got a Trap Rock site with grades, with rock, with no sewer availability, practically speaking, with water questionable. Yeah, there's a water line out in Main Street, but whether that's sufficient or not for residential development, I'm not sure. We've got Halstead with vernal pools. We've got Halstead with slopes. I mean, I'm an engineer. I spent my entire career building things, and I could build something on Trap Rock and I could build something on Halstead, but I got to tell you that the cost of doing that would be way outweighing what I can envision the cost of doing of gaining from the project. So if you've got a difference of opinion on that, cost versus benefit, let us know, please. I doubt it.
So I just, sorry, I didn't want to get up here again, but I've got to say this. A couple of things struck me last year as I heard people vote it down, people who didn't want any multifamily housing in Holden. It was strange to see that vote take place, because if you didn't want multifamily housing, additional multifamily housing in Holden, that the plan last year that was defeated, got voted down, was the best plan you were ever going to get. 2 Superfund sites and a site we were prepared to build on already at Halsted. I think, with respect, I think that this is probably one of the second or third best plan that I've seen to do this, and it gets us out of trouble with it. Now, as a practical matter, you're right. If this goes through, and I think you guys are right too, if this were to go through, the battles, it starts at the planning board. If you want to keep that unbuildable, the thing is to go to the planning board to make sure that whatever plan goes in front of them has so many additional hurdles that nobody would ever think to build. Because the planning board can do that. We don't give up our local rights into the planning board, correct? Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Correct. So the battle could move from this and being compliant with the state to let's move to the planning board if we don't want to see anything built there, aside from all the hurdles that they're putting up by building on a place with vernal pools and all this other sort of the sewer and all that stuff, that you still have control over whether anything can be built. You can put additional hurdles via the planning board on that to make sure that they're not built, right? Yes, other towns have gotten cute and they've overlaid on existing residential properties. It doesn't get within the spirit of the law, it gets within the letter of the law. And my guess is that sooner or later the state's going to go back after that. This is a legitimate, these are legitimate places to build that I don't think are going to run us afoul of that. So that's my point. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of the MBTA law. I'm not a fan of Beacon Hill just coming down from on high and saying, we have to do this. But we went to court and we lost. And all you can hope for is that there is a thoughtful plan out there to how to deal with it and be compliant. I think that this is one of those. And if the plan, if it has to move, the battle moves to the planning board to make sure we have additional things, additional safeguards to ensure that on top of the other safeguards they already listed, if we need more safeguards to make sure that you can have your insurance and maintain your farm, then I'd say let's move the battle to the planning board and make sure that they do that. Because I don't think anybody in this town wants to see you go out of business. No, but they said that, yes, actually, the Supreme Judicial Court has already ruled that they have the right to do this. Yes, that's what they ruled. So when we go to court, we're going to lose. And yeah, okay, we're going to, the Supreme Judicial Court has basically said, when you go to court, you're going to lose. So I would say that what you want is thoughtful, and I don't want to pick on you, Lynn.
Go ahead.
But you got turned around on this, didn't you?
When you say turned around,
You got turned around on this toward, no, we want to be compliant, but we don't want to make it easy. Is that fair?
Basically, yes, that's close enough.
And that's where I landed. When I was shocked when this got voted down last year, because if you didn't want multifamily housing, last year's deal was the best you were ever going to get. 2 Superfund sites and a site we were prepared to build on already. But that we can't put that plan up again because it got voted down. So we have to go to Plan B. And as a Plan B goes, I would say let's move the debate now to the planning board, pass this, get out from under, let us collect our $35 million from Worcester and not spend it on lawyers, and let's work all together to see if we can turn the planning board around to make sure that we limit what can be built here. Sorry, I didn't, thank you.
Question to you is, did anybody think to go for hardship because it's going to create a lot of hardship in this town, especially with the traffic, septic, and schools. I don't like to
Our job was to zone for a location, or sorry, not zone, to suggest zone that would pass town committee. Is there any area in town that would not create traffic?
Excuse me?
He asked, is there any area in town that would not create traffic? Let me just say, we looked at 20 different sites. 20 different sites. We looked at some on the east side of town. We looked at 233 Shrewsbury Street, which is right where that WTAG towers are. There were a lot of concerns about that because the town manager mentioned that every time we've tried to build something there or put solar panels there or whatever, there's a huge pushback. People really don't want anything there. We looked at another place called The Farm, which is just south of that. Again, huge pushback. People weren't going to like that. We looked at places that could have been built very easily. We looked at a couple sites on Quinnipoxet Road that were completely empty. We could have chosen those. But we chose the sites that best fit into the look and feel, or one could say the character of Holden. The Halsted site particularly is what I'm thinking of. And then a site that is likely never going to be built on. So that's where we landed.
I just had one quick question. Nolan Ryan, I live at 228 Brattle Street. I've grown up in Holden my entire life. I do think it's kind of a shame the community is not focusing more on giving this affordable housing. But my question is specifically about the MBTA Communities Act. It seems like the state is willing to enforce their way on this. I work in commercial real estate. I don't understand how a developer would be able to put anything on that site. It seems like there's a ton of ledge, a ton of grade work. Could we expect any punitive response from the state on that? Because I guess after a period of time, it feels like we might have litigious situations internally, and then are they able to have like a review process afterwards?
Already done. They said it was we're in good standing.
Okay. So even if like after a certain period of time, there's not enough units built, or they can't come back to revisit that, and then
just the zoning.
Okay. All right.
All right. They said right here, the proposed plan would put the town in a good position if adopted. That's a very positive sign. Very positive sign.
Hi, Ann Gibney, 1968 Main Street. I grew up on a road in Holden that had a couple farms on it, and I understand what you guys are trying to do by picking sites that are to the letter of the law, maybe if not in the spirit of the law. Personally, when I tried to move back to town, I could barely afford a house here in town. And I know a lot of people in that 25 to 35 range are going to be hard-pressed to be able to move back to a town they might have grown up in. I am late to finding out about all of this, so I don't know, and it's too late to go back, I'm sure, and look at the other sites. But I grew up on Bryant Road, and you have two farms that are no longer farms. And I wondered if that had ever been a site that was considered, because it looked to me to be close enough to not being moved out by all the wetlands and what the city of Worcester has already taken from this town as far as land. So
we did look at a site or two on Bryant Road, and I'm trying to remember the details, but
the Urbanovich farm, and when I grew up,
yes.
It was the Talbot farm, and I know that I think the Urbanovich farm is owned by probably a trust of 20 or so people at this point. But as far as I can tell, that kind of is a perfect site as far as having the same difficulties as Holden Trap Rock would have, in that there's wetlands. I know I've slogged through some of the swamps on there, and it's very close to the Quinnipoxet Reservoir property line. My parents, the house they bought, lost 2/3 of the land before we bought it to the city of Worcester. So it would provide an awful lot of difficulty and maybe allay the fears of a working farm here, as far as giving them peace of mind that what could be built on that is far enough away from them that it wouldn't affect them. I hate to see somebody who's done so much for the town as far as bringing a farm back up and running. That farm has always been there from the time I grew up in town. So I'd hate to see them be in fear of losing their business because this, and I get that it's already zoned for other things, but again, you never know what's going to happen down the line. Trap Rock might decide to close that site in 5 years. You don't know that. Whereas Bryant Road, nothing's happening on it right now, and the chances of it happening isn't going to happen. There's no sewer there either, and a lot of that land won't perk. So I just wondered if that was a site that was considered and if it could be changed at this late hour.
At this late hour, we really can't change it. And so, if in several years somebody does want to try to change it, that's, certainly something they can try to do.
I just want to say in the 2 meetings, thank you very much. You're the first person who suggested an honest plot of land.
Yes.
That lot, or there are lots on Bryant Road, which I believe I'm looking at the same ones you're speaking of, and they were listed as Chapter 61. It doesn't say whether it's defunct, so I believe that went into our decision.
Yeah, it was listed, thank you, James. It was listed as Chapter 61, and we decided to stay away from anything that was Chapter 61. That was why. Thank you.
Hi, Donna Wallace. I am also on the Holden Finance Committee, and I'm a numbers person. And I think I mentioned at a prior meeting that I was very concerned about numbers that were being thrown out, and did a little more investigation even since that meeting, particularly regarding both sites. Found out that there were maybe 64 units at the Halstead parcel that could be developed if they chose to. And on the Trap Rock site, did some math, and after conversations and looking at the maps and all, discovered that, and I don't think it was mentioned tonight, out of the 49 acres there at the Trap Rock site, after you remove all of the wetlands and the rivers and vernal pools or whatever else is on that site, I believe there's 23 acres, 23 point something acres of buildable land there, and buildable, I'll say in quotes, because it is on a quarry, so we don't know if anybody would try to build there. Out of the 23 point something acres that is buildable, you will need to have a road, you'll need to have some parking spaces, you will need to have a septic solution, whatever that might be. So 23 is not realistically the number of acres that a building would be built on. It's less than that. So, and this is where my comment about the numbers is, we have to be really careful, because we're throwing out calculating, what would the revenue be, and from a developer's perspective, would it be worth it to them to develop? But we're taking 49 times 15 to come up with the 650 or so units. But realistically, it's not going to be 650 units, even if somebody built it out. It would be well less than 300. So my point here is that we just have to be really careful with the math, because I think we can overstate things very, very easily.
It's 39 acres.
Yeah, but-
Trap Rock's 39, so
But-
it's half of that. Yeah, so it's maybe 20 buildable, but half of that would be roads and driveways, parking, et cetera. So you'll be lucky to get probably 10 acres of building. I mean, probably not even. So 10 times, if it's 15 per acre, that's 150 at the most. Rough numbers.
Good evening, Joe Stand. I'm over on Holden Street. So first question I have, because we've seen this slide a couple times. The proposed plan would put the town in a good position if adopted for who? For the town or for the state? Because that's statements taken out of context. So could you add a little bit of context to how that was presented, just so we understand?
Would you say adopted? Oh, if our plan is adopted by the state, if the town meeting approves the law, if we adopt the law.
Correct, but
Yes.
it would put the town in a good position, what, for compliance or for future development.
Compliance. That's what they were talking about, compliance.
Okay, and then anybody that's seen my post on Wachu Chat, my issue is there's a lot of assumptions we hear during these meetings. I don't think anybody will build in the future. I don't think this would be expensive. But as that gentleman was trying to point out, even, with 39 acres, it's 585 units at 15 units per acre, correct? We want to take the calculators out, you can check me. At $3,000 a month for rent, you're looking at $1.7 million in rental income. Times 12 months, $20 million a year. That adds up fast once you get beyond that initial expense. So I wouldn't say that it's a done deal to say that it's never buildable. And as for Trap Rock not going anywhere, I'm sure there were times when people said that about Sunnyside, that they're never going to go anywhere, and now they're gone. So I think that's things that need to be taken into account as we're making these decisions. So,
All I can say is
there's no,
we don't have a crystal ball, and we can't answer with 100 plus 1% certainty. That's true. But we make very educated guesses, very educated appraisals. We looked at the facts, and I think Al and Ken and James have articulated the facts, all the difficulties that would be encountered by any builder there who tried to build, and all the reasons why they wouldn't want to. And the fact that on their own website, the Massachusetts Broken Stone Company says that they plan to quarry for decades to come, quote unquote. So.
Yeah, if I may, Linda.
I mean, that's as much certainty as you can get.
well, but I think that's a lot of assumption there. There's nothing that says, all right, the state's putting out this law that says we have to zone. What's to prevent them in the future from offering tax incentives and other ways to stimulate growth and building that may not be there today? So I think if we plan that nobody's going to build there, we're just fooling ourselves by saying that.
As the gentleman said, if people have concerns in the future about building on that parcel, they can go to the planning board. And a future generation could change the plan if they want to as well. Yes.
If I could say a word or two about assumptions. I mean, we've had I don't know how many public meetings, public Zoom meetings, public in-person meetings, and we've made assumptions too, but we've gone back and researched as far as we can every one of those assumptions to find out what the answers might be. Your assumption may or may not be correct. I happen to think not. But I think at the end of the day, here's what we're facing. Here's what I suggest to folks that are going to vote next Monday at town meeting. Ignore every fact you've heard from me, from us. Ignore every fact you've heard from the opponents. Because the choice is really simple. The choice is whether we follow state law or not. The choice of following that state law, the time limit has expired. It expired in December. So what this is really boiled down to, I've seen it over the last several weeks, is to me is an issue, and as a 65-year resident of Holden, I'm sad to see it, but it's a handful of leaders that think they only need to follow the laws of which they approve. It's that simple. We have to follow this law, we're going to follow this law, or the state is going to come in and zone property somewhere in Holden to meet this requirement. And there can be two assumptions there if you want to talk about assumptions. The first is that the state will come in and zone the land exactly as we proposed it. Because after all, this has been considered over several weeks by a citizen committee, so we have at least some validity in that respect. The second possibility is, since it's an MBTA zoning act, the state could say, well, heck, we're going to zone as close to the MBTA facilities as we can get, which means the south end of town, and they come in and overlay a zoning on South Main Street, Holden Street, Salisbury Street. I mean, if you want to throw out assumptions that are totally unverified and totally without basis, we could throw that one out. But it really comes down to following the law. And it's sad to see that we've had such a, I think at times, I won't say acrimonious debate. Maybe tonight has become that, I don't know. but certainly a debate where so-called responsible people have thrown out very irresponsible numbers to instill fear, to instill hostility against a law which is state law, which we are going to follow one way or the other, sooner or later. Your choice, sooner or later.
So the question I have then after that statement is, what is the vote going to be? What's the motion that we're going to be voting on next Tuesday? Is it to comply with the law, or is it to accept this proposal?
It's to overlay these. First of all, at town meeting, you'll be given a handout on the entire zoning bylaw.
Yep.
You'll see these plans. You'll also see the wording of the bylaw, which will basically be to create an overlay zone, which means not to change the existing zoning, but to plop this right on top of it. That's what we'll be voting on. We don't vote to follow the law or not. We're following the law, believe me. It's a Massachusetts law. We're following it.
So the vote will be to accept
On these
proposal?
properties, as we just listed, yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hi, I'm seeking clarification. This is somewhat new to me, and I don't know how many people here have a strong understanding about zoning and what happens and all the legalities in town, in the town. So my question is, just say the state comes in and they say, oh, we're going to overlay it over here where people exist or in open property, I mean, whatever that is. What is the implication to that? So if they overlaid it over existing property where houses are already built, what does that mean? People own the property.
It's a good question. An overlay zone doesn't change any of the rights of the property that's underneath that overlay. If you look at it this way, you've got existing land use, which is in an existing zone in the town. Let's say residential or industrial core, it makes no difference. And we put this overlay zone on. It changes nothing about the rights of those landowners underneath it, but it does create, by right, the ability to build multifamily housing. If those owners ever decided to sell, then multifamily housing could go into that land by right at that point with site plan approval by the planning board.
Okay, so either the existing owners could do it, or if they sold and someone else bought it, they could do it. So anybody who owns that property would be able to do something with it.
That's correct.
That they don't do today.
I hope we made that clear. I mean, if someone has said it, it's highly speculative, but if the Trap Rock wanted to sell out tomorrow after the zone was passed, then they could abandon the quarry and put in multifamily housing. I mean, nobody's ever denied that. We're all speculating on that happening tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, or 5 decades from now, but that's the case.
Okay.
However, there's still the underlying zone. So whatever our zone it is, has to meet the setbacks, front, side, rear setbacks.
Yep.
So when they say by right, my understanding is that skips an aspect of the approval process. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Can I just add in that there? Historically, a lot of towns have zoned only for single-family housing, and you've had to get a special permit to zone, to build multifamily housing, and a lot of times that meets a lot of opposition, as I understand it. And I'll turn it back over to, so this would, to zone as of right means that they don't have to go through yet another hoop, one more hoop, a special permit to zone to build multifamily.
But that's where you say that they could still go through the planning board as far as septic and sewers and water and all that stuff.
Septic is the Board of Health. For multifamily in that zone, they would have to go to the planning board, is my understanding.
Yeah,
Would need site plan approval.
Yes, it's not that you don't go to the planning board at all, but it's one less hurdle that you have to surpass.
To get beyond what the town normally, traditionally has.
Right, yes.
And we've capped the height at 35 feet, like James says. That's basically a two-story house. Pretty much everyone's two-story house with an attic. That's the zoning code in pretty much every town. It's 35-foot height. So you can only really get a two-story building. with a half story as the attic, if you will, or some eaves maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Oh, one more, okay. Oh, no, we have to, for TV. We have to have it for TV.
Okay, I'm Mark Henderson. I'm a third-generation Holdenite. Let's take that supposed problem of we vote this down and then the state comes in and they assign somebody to do this and they overlay what we think is an elegant solution. Let's just overlay single-family housing. Well, that might sound like an elegant solution, except you buy a couple of parcels and you decide you're going to be like at people on the shoreline of Lake Winnipesaukee where they just bulldoze everything, and now you've taken a single-family neighborhood and all of a sudden started putting multifamily houses into that single-family neighborhood. So that's not great either. So I just want to say you can flip that argument around where it's like, it might seem like an elegant solution to do that, but it's really not, because you could end up, it could be, if the state comes in, it could be your neighborhood, and all of a sudden you go from single-family neighborhood to a bunch of multifamilies that you didn't want because we thought we were being cute by, you know, when if this gets voted down, the state comes in and says, we can do whatever we want, and you point them in the direction of overlaying into residential neighborhoods. Now all of a sudden you have a new problem.
So why can't you fight that at the planning board?
Why?
You can. You can.
You can.
Well, not.
But my point is that the same problem exists. There is no elegant solution to this. There is really no elegant solution, aside from saying the easiest solution is. But I'm saying there is elegant solution of dropping this over a residential neighborhood is not elegant solution, because you can have the same problems. You're going to have the same problems wherever you are. The question is, are we going to be compliant with the MBTA law or not? Sorry.
Yeah, the question of why can't you fight it at the planning board? This zone will allow multifamily development by right, which means that a multifamily development project can't be turned down, but it does have to go to the planning board for site plan approval, which will mean that the planning board then can weigh in, mitigating every possible adverse effect of this project that opponents, abutters, and so forth can bring to the planning board. They might require fencing around a project. They might require setbacks for the project. They might require plantings. They might, all sorts of things the planning board can require, but they cannot deny the project. So what this would mean if it went to a single family, if it were laid on a single family zone, I'll give you an example. I know a lot of you folks know I live in the Highland Street neighborhood. If the state dropped a multifamily zone on top of me, I've got a quarter-acre lot. I go to sell my house. If I have problems, I can sell that quarter acre all by itself from multifamily zoning, because it's got the overlay on top of it. And my next door neighbor can do the same thing, and then one next door can do the same thing, and all of a sudden we can have multifamily housing wherever in town, as opposed to trying to do it in a planned manner. And if it ever does develop, keep it all in one or two spots. That's what we've been trying to accomplish. And I'll admit to being somewhat cynical from the very get-go on this committee. I've tried my best to try and steer us towards sites that will comply with the law, but will be very unlikely to be built upon. Because I'm not a fan of this law either. But we are going to comply with it one way or the other.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we close? It's about almost 8:30. All right then. Well, thank you very much for coming out. We really appreciate it.